Welcome back to another episode of the Pax What She Said podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Perri Goldstein, and I am not joined by Maggie Loney today. I am joined by a very special guest, a guest that I go on his show quite a bit. So now the turntables have turned, and I get to have him on my show. So please welcome Grant Bilse,
Thank you,
Wisco
Perri.
Sports Show. Is that still your name of your show, Wisco Sports Show? Hell yeah.
No one's made me change it. The boss has picked it out. It's been a little over 5 years, and no one's made me change it, which has been really nice and convenient. So yeah, and I feel like I disgraced the name of your podcast a little bit because I'm not a she.
It's okay.
It's fine. It works. Okay.
It works. We are accepting of all on the show as long as you are cool with talking Packers, which these days is getting harder and harder to do.
I was gonna say beggars can't be choosers at this point in the 2023 Packers season for sure. Yeah. No, yeah. I'm dumb enough, and I am willing to waste enough time to talk about this team. So yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Because I know on your show you get to talk about all Wisconsin sports, so you can kind of gloss over this team.
Yeah.
Whereas all Maggie and I do is talk about how sad this season is.
Yeah. So it has been sad. Like I think today, little Badgers, little Bucks. But I mean the Packers hang over everything, right? We never ignore them. We just occasionally run out of things to say about them, so we put them in the corner and we come back to them. But
they're in a timeout right now on the Wisco Sports Show.
They are a little bit, yeah. 100%.
So we actually did have some news this week that is unrelated to the Packers losing, although I think it might be a contributing factor to future losses because the Packers traded starting outside cornerback Rasul Douglas to the Bills in what I would consider to be a kind of a surprise. I'm not surprised that the Packers were sellers per se because, hello, they're losing. Just Rasul feels like an integral cog in this machine and was a quite vocal leader. So want your thoughts, and then we can maybe talk about this Rams game.
Yeah, well, I make sure there's enough time to talk about the Packers probably against a backup cornerback in a game that very few people across the country are probably going to watch. But it was not a surprise to us because when we talk about teams that are buyers or sellers, and I know you're a big Mets fan, so we do this every year. It's like, should my team be buyers? We do this all the time. The Packers would be the dictionary definition of the seller team, right? They have all the traits. They're underperforming. They're rebuilding. And Rasul is the perfect piece to sell off. So I don't think we were surprised based on what I talked to about other people. Is it was a shock to the locker room. And, like I had Cassidy Hill on my show the other night. She's very close with Rasul Douglas. And then Mike Clemens, who I talked to earlier today, so a little bit later in the league, was like, it was like a visitation in the locker room. Like it was very sad. So while we look at this team and think like, oh, it makes sense for them to sell, players don't think that way. And I don't blame them for not thinking that way. So certainly a surprise and a shock to the players. I think as we get further removed from this trade, I have to remind myself, and Packers fans would probably be wise to do the same. This isn't that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Like Packers fans, we have a ton of main character energy. Like our team is 2-5, and we still like to think that everything this team does matters a ton in the grand scheme of the league, and it just doesn't. Basically what happened this week was a team that's not good traded a player who's pretty decent to a contender for a 3rd round pick. And I know we're like blowing it up and like this player said this, but like in the grand scheme of things, this is, I don't know, this is going to be a short chapter in Packers history one day, but it's hard to look at it like that right now. And players shouldn't. Like that's their teammate. That's their guy. It's their brother.
100%. Yeah. A few things there. One being, I mean, objectively, it's easy as a fan. Like you have no emotional connection to these guys. So you can look at this and be like, hey, Goot picked up someone from a practice squad a couple seasons ago. He contributed to this team in a very meaningful way, got a pretty big contract for a guy who was just a practice squad player, right? And then Goot flipped that and traded him and turned a practice squad and respectfully to Rasul Douglas, you were a practice squad nobody into a 3rd round pick. Like that's pretty dope GMing if you ask me. That being said, like you said, I mean, he very quickly became a pretty vocal leader and a personality in the locker room and kind of beloved because as Packer fans, you love those stories. I mean, we love our undrafted free agents. We love the stories of the guys who kind of come from the bottom and prove themselves, and then end up becoming kind of folk heroes, especially in that, game against his former team where he picks them off and game winner, etc. But sad to see the locker room so dejected, because I mean, my God, they don't need any more morale lowering.
I didn't know it could get worse, and it did.
Yeah. So hearing that he was surprised and hearing that him and Aaron Jones cried, I mean, I don't particularly love that, but it does sound like it kind of just fell in their laps. Like Goot was like, we weren't particularly looking to shop him. We just happened to get a good offer that we kind of couldn't refuse. And hey, what are you going to do?
Gutekunst said this specifically on Wednesday, and I don't remember which beat reporter asked him about it. I think the question had something to do with balancing the here and now versus the future building of this team. And Goody said, well, look, it's not just that we're getting a third round pick, because we look at this trade and we're like, well, we never get anyone good in the third round anyways. What's the point? And Goody said, well, it's not just that pick, which they may or may not use that pick. They could trade up, they could trade down, they could do whatever. It's about getting that money off the books. And it's about resetting the contract of the asset or of the player, which is something we talk about in baseball all the time. My Brewers, it's young, controllable talent. Or in the NBA, we refer to players as assets and trade pieces and money to be moved around. I mean, getting Rasul's money off the books and then restarting a rookie contract to then be cheaper and to fit the timeline of this team better matters a lot. And I know it sucks, and there's plenty of Packers fans that think Goody is not a people person, and that may or may not be true. I don't know. It's also his job to at times not be a people person. And when you got Buffalo calling and saying, dude, we lost Tre'Davious White, like we really want to make this happen, and it works out well, I think Goody would be silly to turn that down. So I think all of Goody's reasoning that I heard on Wednesday checked out and made a lot of sense.
I agree with you totally. And like, it's not like they sent, I mean, not that this really matters either, because when you call with a top 100 pick, you call with the top 100 pick, but they also sent him to a contender. So like, hey, respect, go. You have a chance to now actually win. You've been frustrated as hell. You can hear it in all of your post-game pressers. Thank you for your time. Go win.
Well, and something that you said, like, this is a pretty slick piece of maneuvering from Goody to pull him off a practice squad and then to eventually flip him for a third. This is a pretty slick deal for Rasul Douglas, too, to be an unwanted player without a home, to come into Green Bay, to ball out, to get a contract with years of future security. It's not working out in Green Bay, so now you get to go to Buffalo. Like, Rasul Douglas isn't suffering here. This is a pretty slick deal for everyone all around, even if this week it's very sad. Yeah. And I can't pretend to understand what it would be like to be putting your all into a team, into a franchise, and then to have the person in charge of that franchise tell you that you're not wanted here anymore. Even though that's not really what it's about, that's what I would totally hear. And I'm sure that's what it sounds like to players too. So I'm sensitive to all of that. But it's a pretty slick deal for all involved when you really think of the last couple of years and then what's to come this year and beyond. I think it worked out pretty well for everybody.
I agree. We had predicted, Maggie and I, before the week, we actually thought the Packers wouldn't do anything, because that felt very Packers to just like simply do nothing. So I was pretty surprised. My prediction actually would have been them moving Preston Smith. So I was a little surprised about Sewell, simply because like the secondary is not great. Like, right, like Jaw's been really dealing with his back injury. It seems like he's progressing fine, but then, we watched Russell Wilson totally pick on Carrington Valentine for an entire game. And again, like this is, look, we're not in contention here. Why not give the seventh round pick, a shot? Sure. I think I would feel differently about this trade if you had Eric Stokes like fully healthy again and just playing on the boundary. And then you're like, well, we had an overabundance of riches in the cornerback room anyway, which we will. I mean, in theory, given that like Eric Stokes actually ends up like being totally fine. So it would work out. Just right now, it feels all of a sudden quite thin.
Yeah. So like part of why I love my job. So I produce a 4-hour show during the day, and then I do my own show. So I'm responsible for filling like 6 hours of content. So I get to hear opinions of so many other people. Like we had Ryan Wood on earlier this week. I mentioned Cassidy Hill, Mike Clemens. We had Mike Renner on earlier today, And something that I heard from a couple Packer people, and I think Ryan Wood was the first, or no, it wouldn't have been Ryan. I bet it would have been Cassidy yesterday, who said, like, let's get this clear. This is not trading depth from a position of strength here. Like, they don't really have much at corner. So this is Goody kind of independent of the rest of the roster making a decision based on one player, which, like, I guess if you don't need Rasul Douglas anymore and you like the return, then you don't need Rasul Douglas anymore and you like the return. And I guess whoever else slides in, it's not like the defense has been playing lights out and the team's winning anyways. But that's definitely important detail to recognize is, like, there's not really a great option behind him, especially with Jair's injury. Like, this is Joe Barry. I mean, I can't imagine Joe Barry is feeling awesome all the time about his job and the way that his defense is going. I can't imagine he felt great knowing that he was about to lose Rasul Douglas from that secondary.
Who's been one of the guys who's been playing like the best, I would say, on that side of the ball, which is pretty unfortunate. I mean, it's hard. It is a balance, right? Because, like, you look at this and you're thinking, I mean, they're not going anywhere this year. They're 2-5. The chances they turn this around are pretty slim based on the way the play has been on the field. You never want to actually, like, tell your guys, like, hey, we're going to just, like, start selling because we don't really believe in you. But that's kind of what the trade deadline shows. Like, if you're sellers at the trade deadline, it's a pretty big signal about how you feel about the rest of this season, in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, they're not playing great and they still have a pretty long stretch of games ahead of them, much better teams ahead of them. So I wouldn't be feeling great if I was on that side of the ball either, but what are you going to do?
It's called show business, not show friends. Is that the expression?
Yes,
yeah, something like that. But I think, if there's a silver lining here for Packers fans, I think the goal for this team now is for the offense to find a little bit of a rhythm and for Jordan Love and these young wide receivers to really start piecing some things together. And I think that is totally still doable. And I don't know that the absence of Rasul Douglas makes that outcome any more or less likely. Like, I think what the Packers need to accomplish this year is still in front of them. And that's not making the playoffs, but they could still totally get where they're trying to go for the rest of the year. The defense, I'm not really so sure. Like, when we think about the rebuild to come this offseason and next season, we all assume, unless Jordan Love, the switch flicks all of a sudden, and it's like, wow, the reality of the next year really changes, which could happen. I don't think it will, but I don't really know what they're going to do with the defense. The offense is like, we need to figure it out, build chemistry. What is the next step for the defense? Yeah,
the defense side of the ball is hard for me because, like, I feel the same way as I did last season, right? Like, last season, they're making the same mistakes. They still have really amazing pieces on this side of the ball. Now, you're 1 year into even more contracts, so you're, like, wasting money and wasting talent, guys who are aging, guys like Preston Smith, right? Guys like Rasul, like, you paid him. What'd you do with him? And all you did was give this defensive coordinator another year. Because why? Because the Packers just had a really high turnover differential on defense for like a month. And so, like, your short-term memory is saying, oh, but the defense played really well at the end of the last season. Like,
yeah,
this was just such a waste on that side of the ball for me. So if there is a silver lining in this year, like, I hope they blow up that side of the ball this offseason. Like, not just new DC, but, like, I want new assistant coaches. I probably want them, and again, this is, like, a little callous, but, like, I probably want them to go, like, full youth movement also on this side of the ball. If you're doing it on offense, you might as well clear some cap, just blow it up.
Well, I think the idea was the offense is going to be young and inconsistent, but when they struggle, the defense can pick it up. And the defense has not been the reason that this team has lost this year.
No, for sure.
But the idea was they were going to be part of a support system for a young quarterback and young offense, and they can't get off the field. And
they haven't been that at all.
I know. And people say, well, of course they're, giving up points. They're out there all the time. But yes, because the offense is going 3-and-out, but also that's the way this defense is designed, is to give up long drives, but try to hold up in the red zone. And they've done an okay job. But I'm glad you went where you went with Joe Barry. I'm not trying to pick on the guy because I don't know that he deserves all that he gets. But yeah. I the guy who hosts our midday show, Bill, earlier today, I said, Bill, what is this year for Joe Barry? What are we doing? Like Joe Barry probably thinks the same thing. He's like, why did you just bring me back? No one likes me. No one likes the defense that I run. We're not a successful defense. Why am I here? Like I can see where this is trending in the offseason. Was this year just to make darn well sure that Joe Barry isn't the guy to revitalize his Packers defense? I don't. It's just such a waste.
I have no answers for you. I mean, stopgap for like just not too much transition. But again, like time is so of the essence in the NFL. Like one season can set you back so much. And you're looking at all this young talent on that side of the ball. Like you, as in the Packers, have put so much into that side of the ball. You've got a first round pick who like has LVN played like 16 snaps a couple of games ago. Like, what are we doing here with this? You know, I think actually Devontae Wyatt statistically has actually had a pretty nice season so far with more opportunity. Quay Walker looks like literally the only player on that side of the ball that shows up in any kind of consistent manner. But like, you don't want to waste precious developmental time with a coach who you know is going to be out in a year. That's silly.
This is what I said going into this year. I was like, a lot of fan bases and a lot of teams would look at a year like this and think this is going to suck and there's going to be nothing redeeming. But I said before the year, it's like with no expectations and with a complete reset, like there's opportunity here. Like you can use this year to figure things out, right? To try guys, to try things. This is your opportunity. So, you know, you mentioned not too much turnover at once. You know, this maybe would have been the perfect year to try out a defensive coordinator and to mess around. And they didn't really do that.
I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens the rest of the season for sure. I mean, like you said, the Packers are about to play the Rams this coming week, right? They're going up against a backup QB. Like this should be like the perfect opportunity
at home.
At home to be like, we're not that bad. Like we can win some game. Like you should be able to beat this team coming into Lambeau. And it's sad that I actually don't feel confident at all.
Well, I don't know why would you? You know what I mean? At this point, if you're picking the Packers to win, it's because you're optimistic and you just hope that they can and hope that they will. I think Jesus, one win, just having something to celebrate, even if it's not pretty, you know, even if it's riddled with penalties. And I remember a couple weeks ago, you did Pack a Day with Andy and Alex, and you guys kind of talked about this. I think it was probably the Raiders game. And you're like, I don't know that I'd feel that much better about this if the Packers would have stolen a win at the end. And I think in the aggregate, in the big picture for the season, you're right. Like if the Packers win coin flip games against the Raiders and the Broncos, and they're instead of 2-5, they're, what would they be? 4-3. The record would be different. You know what I mean? That doesn't make them a better team. That just means that they won really two ugly games. But I'll take it because these guys will take it. Like to just get the monkey off your back and to get a breath of air, especially now after Rasul Douglas has been traded. Like, I don't care if they win this game 9-3, like that game against the Jets in 2010. Like, you just need some sort of win so everyone can relax. And I think that would help them then continue to make progress or to continue to make progress.
I agree.
So I'll take it.
I know. I agree with you. I think I said that again, like, I feel like every game this season is like in context for like what we've seen previously. Right. So like in the Raiders game, you're coming off of a Saints game where like the offense was clearly bad. The defense was not the problem in either of those games. And you're like, did they really deserve to win? They kind of shot themselves in the foot. Like, maybe try to learn from this. Okay. We're a couple games removed from that abysmal game. The Raiders are terrible. They've already fired their head coach. They have already benched their starting QB. And you're like, this game feels so far away from where this current Packers team feels like they are, that now I'm like, I'm with you, where I'm like, this team needs to learn how to win. Like, they're so young. They cannot get dejected. You cannot turn this into a locker room that doesn't know how to win, right? Like, that was something Aaron Rodgers always said in all of his seasons, which is like, when you walk into this locker room, you understand that this team wins. Like, that is the mentality in this building, and they need to keep that energy. They need to keep that philosophy, because you don't have that many guys anymore, especially with one extra one gone from a previous regime that knows what it's like to always be playoff contender, Super Bowl contender, above 500 teams.
Yeah, well, and I like what you said, and as someone who hosts a radio show and tweets a lot, like the context around comments and takes changes very quickly, right? So I'm definitely like, we will take an ugly win now, but going into that Raiders game, you got to remember, where we were coming from. What game was the game? It was the Lions game, right? And then they had 9 days off because it would have been Thursday night. Yeah. No, it would have been 10 or 11 days off, Thursday night to Monday night. So
they were 2-1.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, all right, this is a chance to get right. The Lions were way better. So it's understandable. The Lions are an elite team. So with all this time off, you figure out what was wrong and you come out against a Raiders team that can be had. And let's see it in front of a friendly crowd in Vegas. And it was so bad right from the jump where it's like, okay, this game has already been a failure. Like my hopes coming into this game, my plan for what this game could be is already in the tank in the first half. So a win on that night would have been nice for a win, but also that game was falling short of my expectations and hopes. That's no longer the case. I don't have expectations going into games. So the context around these games has changed. I'll take an ugly win. Whereas I think a month ago, I'd feel very different about an ugly win.
Grind it out. I think also we've been seeing and it's not good, right? The offense can't score in the first half, but they're clawing their way. Like it's till the clock strikes 0 that this team is battling. And there's something to be said for that. I think there really is. And so it would be nice because the last couple of games you're like, okay, one more drive. Like they're never really like that far out of it either. It's like 2-score games. Like you could come back from 2-score games. The Lions game is the only one that was like, all right, we're done. We're done here.
I'm willing to just put that game to the side because the Lions are awesome.
The Lions are very good.
That Thursday night game was more about me saying, okay, the Lions have arrived. Like this is a team that's ready to shed the loser tag and come into a divisional rival on a short week at night and win. So that Thursday night game was as much to do about the Lions as it was the Packers.
Yeah. But my point being in that like this offense kind of trying to claw their way back. I mean, even in this last game against the Vikings, and like, again, they weren't going to win. It was 24-10, but Jordan Love, it's still fourth quarter, and he's like trying to sling it downfield. Like he's doing everything humanly possible to just like get this ball down the field, get the ball to my receivers. They're not helping him out in any way, shape, or form. It is possible to me that, and I think the Rams are a perfect example of this in like, this can one of those fourth quarter drives turn into 7 instead of turn into 3 or turn into 0? Yeah. Like, can we step up for our quarterback here and do something and have like, look, I don't want them to be behind because they can't score in the first half. That's a side note, but like there are moments where I felt like this team could claw their way back into games and it just hasn't happened. It's like that kind of coin flip situation. So yeah, I mean, if it's ugly and they claw their way back in the fourth quarter for a comeback drive, amazing. Like this team to your point, like this team needs one of those like galvanizing moments.
And they've been close, like, and this doesn't matter to anyone, I know, but like against the Raiders, they were right. Like if Christian Watson punches that ball into the end zone instead of, being roped down by the horse collar, that game could go differently. The Falcons game, you know what I mean? Like all of these games have come down to a couple of drives that have stalled out in the red zone or, it's just, if it's not something, it's something else. And Jordan Love is having to work so hard to move the ball up and down the field. And then you get in the red zone and he has to work so hard to punch the ball in because there's just not a lot of freebies for him in this offense. Like AJ Dillon, if on 1st and 10, he gets the ball and picks up 3.5, like that's a W. And that goes to show how low the bar is with the running game right now. And I mean, if they have a passing play of 12 yards, that's a coup. Like there's no freebies where, of course, well, he did everyone a solid and busted a 40-yard touchdown. You know what I mean? Like Eric Eager, our guy, refers to these offensive drives. You're crossing the street every play. Every play that you have to run on a drive, you're risking a penalty or a sack or a negative play. And a penalty, a sack, negative play, any one of those things that kills a drive for the Packers.
100%.
It kills it. 100%. If they go backwards 1 yard on 1st and 10 or they get one penalty, they're done. They're punting. And it's just so hard to score points consistently in the NFL like that.
100%. They shoot themselves in the foot so hard. They do not allow themselves to have nice things. I mean, it's to the point where I'm like, a first down. Yeah. Like moving the chains in and of itself is so difficult. And there are some things, I mean, everyone's like, there's nothing they do well. there's some things that I think they do kind of well. Like, I'd like to see Jordan Love continue to attack the middle of the field. I think he's really comfortable doing it. And I think that there's, like, again, something to be said for a guy who's still really early in his career, who's cool with doing that. I don't know what to do with the run game, but Aaron Jones needs more than 10 touches. I don't know what else to say about that. I mean, it's just one of those things where, like, and I've watched people who are much better at this than me. I've watched, like, Ben Fennell, and I've listened to the shows with Mike Wall that Andy does, and especially QB School with J2 O'Sullivan, because his breakdowns have been phenomenal and kind of like clarity moments. And the issue with this offense is simply that everything is going wrong. Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's not people who are out there saying, like, oh, well, Jordan Love's just bad. I actually don't think that that's true. I mean,
no,
there's
we had certain Mike on today. He's like, Jordan Love, I think, is the best thing going for this freaking offense.
Yeah, he's not losing them games. He's just not given any assistance whatsoever. I mean, he obviously doesn't trust his offensive line. Not that he should. They cannot, like you said, you get 3 yards in the run game and you're like, woo, positive play. And his receivers have bricks for hands these days, and, like, sometimes are running wrong routes. So any one moment, any one play where one of those players out of the 11 is doing something wrong, things break down. And on every single play on the Packers offense, someone is doing something wrong. And so you're just watching that happen. But I think over the next 10 games, my hope, and this is just me being an optimistic fan because I'd like to trust development and I'd like to trust Matt LaFleur because I'm not ready to give up on him as a coach yet, something's going to have to click. It's not going to be everything all at once, but at some point over the next couple of games, we're going to have to start seeing some things clicking. It's going to still be up and down, and it's going to be imperfect, but maybe a handful of drives where things don't go wrong, where they don't have stupid penalties, like where they do have a handful of free, like, just some incremental. It has to be incremental.
Yeah. I like Matt LaFleur too much to think that the rest of the year is going to look like this. I still do. I know a lot of Packers fans don't. I still do. I have enough, and maybe it's, my priors, but I have enough evidence the last couple of years to think that Matt LaFleur is a better offensive coach. It's hard to put out a fire when everything is on fire. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to plug a leak when there's 30 different leaks. And I think Matt LaFleur is feeling that he's got a little bit of the brain scramblies right now because he feels as though he needs to help out over here and address this and that and the other thing. And it's really hard to fix a problem if you can't isolate a problem, and they're dealing with a million different problems. Yeah. I don't think this team, I said this line the other day, I'm very proud of this. I don't think this team is struggling because of a lack of a solution. I just think there are too many problems. It's not a lack of, there's too many problems at once. It's really hard to get your footing in a situation like that.
I totally agree. And that's why I think, like, slowly things are going to have to start to click, because they're going to fix one problem and it'll start to look better. And then they can focus on another problem and it'll start to look better. Like, I really genuinely do believe that that's going to happen. I just think there's too much young talent. And like you said, Matt still gets the benefit of the doubt for me. I still think he's an incredible coach. I still think some of the things that he's, like, putting out there, or at least trying to get them to do, are really creative and really fun. It's just not getting executed properly. And sure, like, coming prepared to games is on him. When the guys aren't prepared, that's on him. I don't know. I've never been in a locker room. I don't know what it's like to be a head coach in the NFL. I'm not going to, like, give my 2 cents on how to fix that. I just trust that he's fully aware that he needs to fix that.
Yeah. I mean, I think you stated it perfectly. I don't know that I have much to add to that. I still like Matt LaFleur a lot, and I think he can be the head coach of this team in the future. But one of these weeks, I'm going to need to see a little bit. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I am losing faith a little bit week by week, not because they're losing, just because it looks the same. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, 100%. If they lose this week to the Rams 31-29 because Joe Barry's defense can't get off the field, or, because Brett Rippon has the game of his life, fine. But it needs to look different. You know what I mean?
If the Packers score 30 this week and lose, I don't give a flying F.
I'll get drunk on Sunday.
I will be so happy because that means things went right. And I agree with you. Like, the win-loss column is more affecting the way I feel about this team because they're just not getting better. It's not as if they're, like, losing these really tough, close games and, like, the offense is doing, there's still problems. If they were 2-5 and I was like, okay, but they're getting better every week, I don't think that I would care so much. But okay, let's wrap with two things. One, just like what going into this game, one thing that you like really want to see this team do.
Dobbs and Watson. I want those two guys to look like they have played another year of football compared to all of the guys around them. That doesn't mean that they both need to go out for 200 yards, but I should be able to tell when watching those two that they have a year of experience and maturity that some of the other guys don't have. And honestly, I haven't seen it. Honestly, the guy who I've been most impressed with is Jaden Reed, and he's figuring this out on the fly. Like, so that would be my one thing. And I know it's two players, but they're kind of in the same bucket because they're in the same situation.
Yeah.
And Jason Vrabel said this week that, you know, this is the healthiest that Watson has been. He's reaching speeds in practice that they hadn't seen before. Great. But I think those two guys, that would be my thing.
I agree with you. Like, those are the guys you kind of were leaning on this season going in, just being like, you're our bets.
Good luck.
Good luck. Thanks. But we've seen, the thing is that you can say that because you saw it last season. You saw the flashes, you saw the ability, you saw the month-long stretch of Christian Watson being an absolute superhuman. Like, you know, they have it. So.
And Dobbs strikes me as really mature in all business, but then again, so did Devontae Adams, and he had an awful, miserable second year. So, you know, I want to be fair to these guys. Maybe it's not fair to ask your two guys to carry all the weight, but every once in a while, like maybe not every week, but, you know, here and there.
Something. I mean, to me, you mentioned Jaden Reed. I think Dontavian Wicks has had a really nice beginning to his season too, but like Dobbs has been really the only one that I find going up and like actually making plays for his quarterback when need be.
Not that they give him chances to do that in the fourth quarter. We've elected to do that with Christian Watson instead. But
hey, all right. Are you taking the Packers to win this game?
Not with my own money that I earn. I only have so much of it. But I mean, shoot, they were favored by 3 when I checked earlier today, which there's no way in hell that line is -3 if there's a good chance that Matthew Stafford plays. And I guess, you know, at the time we record this, something could change. But you know what? I'd pick the Packers at home against a backup quarterback. I think they're due for some things to click. I've also said that for the last couple of weeks. So take that with a grain of salt. But this team is not this bad. They haven't played half of their games yet, right? This is a 17-game season. We haven't even reached the halfway point. I know it's November 1st, but this team's had a lot of time off. And I weirdly also think that a weekly game is good for this team. So I think some things might come together. They're at home. So I'd pick them.
Rhythm. I'd like to pick them as well. I just think, like I said, this team needs kind of a galvanizing moment. Like, this is like could be like a time in the season where you look back and like, okay, this was the game where they just needed something, like some wind under their sails. And I especially think that they better pound the rock if it's a backup quarterback. I mean, come on, like what else? Like, what else could you ask for in a game where you know you need to turn things around? So I'm also not going to put my hard-earned money on anything for this team. However, I would love to walk out of this weekend with a W.
My money is not hard-earned. I just don't have very much of it, so that's why I won't. That's why I won't bet it on the Packers. But I don't know. I'm hopeful. This seems like maybe, and I felt very similar things last weekend, but the Vikings are a lot better than the Rams, and their quarterback situation until Kirk Cousins got here was a lot better than the Rams. So I think this could be the week. It could be. I'm not saying it will be, but I think there's plenty of reasoning to think it might be.
Well, that's fandom for you, I guess.
I was going to say, that's the gambling breakdown that everyone comes here for. Jesus.
Yeah.
It could. I don't know.
You know what, though? We're out of things to say, I think, at this point. So, Grant, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I love talking ball with you. Please tell all of our listeners where they can find you, how to follow you, all the things.
Well, I host the Wisco Sports Show every day from 4 to 6. It does get posted as a podcast. There's a lot of people who just listen to the podcast and they don't listen live, which I think is a fun, like that's a cool, different, that's cool. So that's fine. You don't need to listen to live radio. It's a podcast, Wisco Sports Show, wherever you find your shows. And I'm on Twitter at Wisco Grant. So I always tweet out stuff there too, if you're interested.
If you didn't know, he's from Wisconsin.
I am. Yes.
He's in Madison, if you're in Madison, but you're all over the state now on the radio, so you can tune in anywhere.
Yep, I'm in Milwaukee a bunch. I'm on for those who live in Wisconsin and listen to radio, I'm on in Eau Claire, La Crosse, Madison, up by Shawano too. So slowly but surely growing. But you can always listen to the podcast, check it out if you just want to get a little taste.
You should, especially if you're a all Wisconsin sports fan. Grant does Packers, but he does Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, the whole shebang.
Badgers, like a Midwesterner there.
Badgers. I'm doing good, right? Okay. And once in a blue moon, you can catch me on the radio too. That's always a fun time when Grant has me on. So, Grant, thank you so much again. This was a pleasure. Good to get just like a differing of opinion or thought process on this team. Thanks, and go Pack Go.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, Perri.